Chapter 3 Gandharva's Quest. With the shining stars and untimed rhythms of magnetic spheres rolling through space, there would be no better function for the forms of solid light than vibrations giving meaning to the chase. Cosmic music eludes the mind to allow freedom from entrancing distractions. When hearing the hum of life's womb, the one is all in expansions and retractions. Tabitha could feel the music from her radio in ways that she came to accept as common to her and wholly uncommon to others. The contemporary popular songs used musical structures which evoked emotive reaction in most. She, however, could see through the sugary confection of lyrics and sound effects to taste the rich substance of music as a present force of human creativity. The creative element of humankind always inspired her, regardless of the direction of her inspiration, and so the tones evoked rhythms, simple language of secret symbols sounding in images, might guide her soul while drifting listless alterations of both dark and light. With gratitude for the view she saw of joy and love unbounded, her mind's eye reacted with infinite wonder of imagined and unimagined splendor, as though the world were one entity and all had its place and function. Even the agitating worries were nothing more than a chance to become greater than one negatively affected by those worries. Even pain was in truth an opportunity to grow. These principles were what she held to, with earnest hope that they were the truth of existence, because without them the world she knew would seem random and without cause for love and joy. Without the genuine gratitude for the world as it is, she would feel herself a cold being incapable of love, and no worse fate could she ever know for any being. The ideas of love, the romantic and formal appraisals of love, the long renditions of artistry through the course of human history that hearkened to the momentary driving force for all beings to exist. Love is what preoccupied each process of thought and feeling that Tabitha experienced. It was what she willed herself to do, because she dreaded the prospect of what the alternative would be. Having thought that, and with the idea that the reader knew that thought, she felt unable to dismiss the thought easily, and it hung like an uncomfortable nude in the gallery of her mind. She thought, as she parked the car, between the moments of physical and mental dexterity needed to land the rolling vehicle safely within the lines of the spot designated by her apartment complex, about how she willed into being the very basic assumption that love is the imperative in all life. How love is evident in all communication, regardless of how twisted in rendering love a communicative form might be, passed through the murky mists in her mind to become the solid shape of a thought she would otherwise have left obscured in her psyche. For if she willed herself to believe that love is the imperative, then it is her will, or anyone's will, that is the true imperative. To that end, what is the underlying basis for what becomes the real, actualized imperative? Is it the love she wills? Is it the greed that another may will? With all of the conflicting notions inherent in the diversity of wills bringing into being their own ideal of the imperative in all life, what constitutes which will win out? What would the harmony of such a collision of wills sound like? Would there be any music of love penetrating the noise? She walked from her car to the stairs that led up to the third-floor apartment. Her feet fell on the cement and metal structure with resonations that she tried to find the music within. Her head was spinning with the possibility that her music, her sound of love, was only her means of distracting herself from the harsh finality of a pointlessness to life, and the sound of her ascending the exterior staircase did little to stop the spinning. When she reached the third floor and looked out to the parking lot to see her car nestled snugly between the lines, it was another sense that arose in stimulation to reinforce the distractive attempt valiantly made by her hearing. Dismissing the idea that she was experiencing an olfactory hallucination, she opened the door to the apartment and was met with spongy, sweet waft of an aroma permeating from cookies reaching their ideal state in the oven. Luke was standing in the kitchen area, wearing his apron and busily tending to 3 separate tasks on the large island counter that faced the entranceway from across the living room space. He looked up with less than a smile on his face, clearly still annoyed from their discussion before she left to go to dinner with her friends. "It smells wonderful in here," she said, removing her wrap and opening the closet near the door. While placing it on a hanger, she thought she heard him grumble, and she prepared for a night of tense discussion. When she heard him speak, she understood that the noise she had heard was the closet door moaning softly on its hinges. "Thanks," he spoke with as much joy as he could muster. "After you left, I brooded for a little while, and then I figured I might as well do something productive." "What kind of cookies?" she asked, moving across the room to lean on the island counter. "Orange cardamom," he replied, not looking at her as he did. She knew full well he chose those flavors with full knowledge that she did not enjoy that combination, and she simply shrugged it off as either a small way he was expressing his displeasure, or as his way of pacifying himself with a flavor combination in cookies that she knew he did enjoy. She also heard herself think that this simple moment was laden with way too much complexity in the realm of interpersonal relations than she was comfortable with. I know you don't like that flavor much, but I was in the mood for it. I also am not thinking of only myself, so I am preparing a batch of chocolate orange for you. She only somewhat appreciated the gesture, because she still felt that his way of making peace offerings with cooking was a practice that served to provide him with a devious feeling of security. He seemed to bake things that she would eat out of obligation as much as enjoyment, to lead to her increase in weight and size and make her less likely to garner attention and attraction from other potential mates. This also made her ponder the unnecessary complexity of her relationship. What chocolate are you using? She was looking at the small pile of shaved chocolate on the plate in front of him as he was stirring the dry ingredients for the batch of cookies in a bowl. It's that stuff I picked up at the farmer's market 2 weeks back, because we didn't go last weekend. When he said it, she felt his sudden recollection to be barbed. She couldn't prove it and let it slide. How is it? She asked, wondering why he didn't ask how her friends were. Give it a try, he said, sliding the plate closer to her and wiping his hands on his apron before grabbing one of the eggs on the counter. He started the process of cracking it to remove only the egg white from the shell into the bowl where the whisk awaited. But be warned, it is unsweetened. She pinched a little of the shavings between her thumb and forefinger, realizing as she did so that she should have washed her hands beforehand. She let it go and took the crumbling cocoa into her mouth, swirling the brown, earthy dollop into her saliva and letting it rest on her tongue. The bitter twinge behind the dusty flavor, reminiscent of archaic totems and jungle tombs, spread throughout her system of awareness, overpowering the hydrocarbons emanating from the cookies baking in the oven until she could smell the essence of the plant that molted such molecules into being. The wholly organic form of the experience was wrought in a single absolute clear perception, which she spoke with all due respect and good spirit. It tastes like really high-quality dirt, she said. Luke put down the bowl he had picked up to begin whisking the egg whites within, and she could see clearly that she had unintentionally offended him. The scope of how he took the offense would be up to him, but she could guess that this could get much worse before it would get better. Nice, he huffed with sarcasm as he untied and removed the apron. And as he did, Tabitha thought about the reader watching her in this moment, and about her own will to being, her own will to make her life, not how it would become naturally, but how she would will it to be. Her idea of happiness and dignity and self-worth all congealed in her mind with much more efficiency than the dough of the cookies in the oven did. On that notion, she decided to let Luke be as he will and no longer try to play complex rounds of emotional compromises to maintain a relationship that was more of an effort than a charm. She would not work to keep it together, but neither would she do it any harm. This would be up to him. I'm just trying to do something productive with you in mind, and you give me a senseless remark like that. He put the apron on the counter. I don't even know why I even try. He looked at her, waiting for a response, and she just looked back at him. You're too much. He shook his head and walked toward the front closet. You went out with your friends after I told you that I didn't appreciate you doing that as we are trying to save up for the house. And then when I relent so that you could go without feeling guilty and spending a little time with friends without me, he said as he opened the door and turned around to look at her, the frustration he expressed clearly on his breath and brow. You don't respond to any text I send you, and then walk in here as though nothing is wrong. What if nothing really is wrong? She asked, wondering if he would stay calm enough for her to tell him that she had shut her phone off along with her friends as they dined. She pondered if he would relent now enough to hear about the idea of the reader and the discussion about not being known by others as the being she truly knows herself to be, or if she could discuss with this man the idea of music being her brain's best distraction from a cold harshness of existence about which she did not want to think. She wondered if she could share with him how good the honest words of pure love from Jason made her feel, or her admiration for his use of words, or for Danny's strength and Carl's versatility. She thought of how good she felt in the simplest ways of being, from spending time with her friends, and did not look upon this man with whom she had forged what should be the most foundational, intimate, and trusting relationship in her life as being the source from which she drew serenity and a sense of dignity. She had these thoughts in the instant between when she asked the question and when he responded with a volume of voice that portrayed how hurt he felt. Of course there's something wrong, he shouted, and quickly showed displeasure for himself in doing so. He turned back to the closet and pulled his shoes onto his feet. I feel upset and angry, and I feel like I'm not getting any care from you. He stood straight and pulled his jacket from the hanger in the closet. I just spent time here without you while you were out and about. He put his arms through the sleeves and checked the pocket for his keys. Now you can be here while I am out. He unlocked and opened the front door. If you're going to leave the stuff in the kitchen for me to clean up, at least shut off the oven before you go out. And I know you have to go out again to host the open mic across the river. Have fun, and please understand if I am not there this week, he said with a tone of mock civility as he walked away, letting the door swing closed behind him. She stood where she was, at the counter facing the door for a moment, wondering if he was going to lock the door behind him, or if he'd come back in to continue his verbal expression of his frustration. She attuned her ears and heard the fading sound of his footsteps as he descended the exterior stairs. She breathed deep the soft and sweet air and walked to the oven, turning the dial to cease its production of heat. She looked with a silent curiosity at the baking materials on the counter and decided to let them stay as he left them. She walked from the kitchen to their bedroom and stood before the full-length mirror to see her body. She positioned herself one way and then another, holding each pose for such a brief duration that the game seemed silly to her, and it evoked a genuine smile on her face. There she is, she told herself when the image she wanted to see in the mirror was looking back at her. She had put on weight since she and Luke had gotten together, that was clear, but it fluctuated, and she still kept herself toned, fit, if not with ever-increasing strength. She was 34 and still felt as though her best years were not yet lived. At moments, she would feel the pangs of fear that accompanied the ticking of her biological clock, but she would devote herself to the musical craft with greater intensity when that would happen, convincing herself that her contribution to the world, that of music to beautify, was what she truly desired. What she wanted above all else, though, was to be desired. Wondering how she had gotten here in this room, looking at herself in this mirror as her longest lasting relationship with a man was most likely crumbling at this very moment, she let her eyes cast their view over the image of her body, her broad shoulders providing a frame for her considerably large breasts, her waist bigger than she would have liked, but not terribly big by any means, and her legs appearing slimmer in contrast to her larger upper frame, all captivated her. She held her arms out to her side and could see her hourglass figure plainly. This made her feel good, and she disliked herself for deriving pleasure from something as superficial as her appearance. She looked at her own eyes, the orange-brown eyes that she loved, and thought about her years in San Antonio. She thought of her first months after having moved to Austin and how she nearly gave up and moved back to the South. She recalled her decision to venture out to the open mic event at the coffee shop north of the capital's downtown area so she could get back to performing without the pressure of large crowds. She remembered the friendships she developed, the inspiration she experienced, the joys she obtained in blending with the musicians and poets in that little shop over the course of the months that followed that first outing. How was that time, which seemed so near, so clear, and so readily present in her heart and mind, 11 years past? Had she lost her focus, her drive to be the beautiful voice she yearned to see in the world? Had she become distracted by the run towards some semblance of security? Why did she place less emphasis on the sacred ideal of her own artistry than she did on the material gains and interpersonal expectations she immersed herself in? I don't know why I did it, she said to her reflection, but I will stop it now. She looked directly at herself in the mirror and breathed in deep. I do not love Luke, she said. Not the way he wants to be loved, not the way he may need. And then she just looked at herself, thinking that something would happen after she announced that. And so it did. Not in the obvious fashion of happenings, but in that subtle way that changes the world in the greatest of ways whenever it does occur. She accepted that she said it, not to convince herself of it, not to tell the reader, and not to vent it out to be free of its effects upon her. She said it because it was true, because she was the only one able to tell her that, and it was something she needed to hear. Like an overture that concluded, the moment rang with a silence of space untouched by eyes and thought. She felt her heart beat, and then her breath swirled, and her music returned with the power of her love. The manner of her music was more than words over melody, more than rhythms or rhyme. A sense of self removed from her did caress and warp her time. She watched through the eyes of her body as she moved and did that which she recognized as her own action, yet it was her willful diversion of music, what she knew as love, that held her attention as she moved about the world. This is what she did. She put on her makeup sitting at the small vanity within the bathroom. She applied the colors to accent her contours until she felt satisfied that she was neither too dull nor too extravagant in her appearance. She then packed up her makeup into its travel bag, and then began packing up her toiletries. She entered the closet that extended off the bathroom and retrieved the purple suitcase in the corner, opening it. She took her clothing off the hangers in the closet and packed them neatly into the case, followed by the clothing in the wicker dresser that ran along the wall of the closet. Once done with the clothes, she packed her toiletries into the suitcase and zipped it up. She exited the closet and bathroom and bedroom, stopping at the kitchen to grab 2 spoons, 2 forks, a butter knife, and a serrated knife, her 2 favorite mugs, and 2 apples. She packed all of that into her suitcase and walked into the living room. She picked up her guitar and laptop in their cases and slung them over her shoulders. She opened the door and walked out, wheeling the full suitcase behind her. She turned and locked the door. She carried the bags down the stairs and walked to her car. Popping the trunk, she placed the suitcase in, followed by the laptop and then her guitar. She closed the trunk and walked to the driver's side of the car, opening the door and climbing in. Once she started the car, she did not turn the radio on, but let her music continue guiding her. She drove south and east as though she were simply following a program of movements that would bring her to the open mic she was hosting at the restaurant across the river. She did not know, in truth, if she was making sounds, humming, singing, whistling, but she knew the music was with her. While on the interstate road, when the traffic near the downtown area became thicker and slower, when the stream of brake lights began to move at a pace of liquid molasses along the asphalt, she began to conclude her internal symphony and understood what she had done. "I just left," she said, and a chill tightened her scalp so that her hair felt like straw. She looked in the rearview mirror and saw her eyes, the same eyes that had looked at her in the mirror in what used to be her bedroom, and she knew that she had made the choice. There was no other way to resolve what would have fallen apart faster and faster over time, she said to the windshield. And I should have been able to leave a year ago or more. But comfort takes a long time to shed. The trappings of our own way of being, the way by which we build our own cage, is the manner of how we keep ourselves in situations we would otherwise not accept. How could I have been willing to become this version of me? I coded myself, my true self, in that which I used to sustain myself. I don't want the house in the suburbs. I don't want to spend my life pursuing music as a hobby. It is the highest calling for me. And why did I let myself get caught in the attempt at achieving some kind of domestic bliss with a man who, yes, he's attractive, but who doesn't suit my core desires any more than I suit his? I cannot. I cannot. I can. She trailed off as something gripped her heart fiercely. Anger welled up. Not sadness for having made the choice to change her life, not tears for a lost relationship, but anger for having spent so much of her time and energy, her precious time alive, on an interpersonal reality with someone whom she had figured was not right for her. The anger was not directed towards him or towards the situation, but was aimed squarely at herself. She tried to form the verbal expressions to properly communicate with all due civility and dignity the magnitude of her anger. Yet she felt only questions form, questions that would diminish herself by challenging her inability to break away earlier. She tried to find the unquestioning thoughts that could be the salve upon her soul. But words were trite and shallow compared to what she felt. All the self-loathing, all of her disdain for herself in that moment, every flinch-inducing memory over the last year when she had experienced the clear internal dialogue regarding her desire to break up with Luke, each little thought that she had repressed during that time sprung to mind and joined together, linked like the cars of a freight train barreling forward with unstoppable momentum, and rather than letting it go to her body and causing her to vomit, she did what she believed any self-respecting, passionate woman would do in that situation. She screamed. She yelled with all of her essence of being and did not care for what other drivers and cars around her might think. She let fly all the air in her lungs and filled them again to continue the cry. It was not her intent to lose control, but a mission to regain control of herself. That she did it with sound, in the purest form of what she could create as an expression of her anger was fitting, she thought. And in that thought, she found the center from which to cease her yell. Looking around at the other cars in traffic, she noticed the car to her left held a man who was nervously doing what he could to not look at her. When she looked to her right, she saw a woman sitting behind the steering wheel, looking at her with a passive expression of understanding. When their eyes met, the woman frowned and nodded her head in silent recognition of Tabitha's emotion. Recoiling in her seat, Tabitha rested her head and exhaled deeply. The traffic moved slowly forward. She placed her attention on driving with great care and focused on that task. She began to think about what 3 songs she would perform for her spot at the open mic, and how she would manage to perform the functions of host. She also wondered how someone so set on the presence of music as the locus of her identity and the center of her life could spend so much of her time in relative silence. Tabitha wanted to call Danny to find solace. She wanted to call Jason to learn insight. She wanted to call Carl to rediscover laughter. She did not turn her phone on, though, for she did not want to feel tempted to see the texts from Luke, nor did she want to run the risks of calling him or receiving a call from him. She pressed her way through the traffic and wound through the local streets until she arrived at the venue where she would rise above her trouble, put on a happy face to entertain patrons of the establishment, and coordinate the string of performers, and figure out where she would sleep after her work for the day and night was done. She opened her car door once she had parked and stood up straight into the night air. Her music rolling in the air, pulling on the stars and dancing among the magma near the Earth's molten core.